as we move through life, we're always signaling status in some way. And there's a very interesting game theory to how status works. So this is probably, for me, was the biggest profound thing that came up in my research on all these topics. So this is a book by W. David Marks, who talks about status and culture. And he kind of lays out this game theory of status signaling, how important it is for us to constantly be showing people where we are in status, right? If we're in the military, we have military uniforms, it's pretty clear where we are, right? We wear medals to show our achievements. We have stars, people know rank. But in civilian life, right, we constantly need to be kind of signaling where we are, that kind of thing. So the game's theory of status signaling. Everyone's best move is to imitate the status signals of those above you.
Okay.
Which is something I feel in my life I've gotten wrong a lot. A lot of ways, it's something you can get into trouble if you're trying to stand out too much, right? The exception is that the highest status and the lowest status individuals in the hierarchy. And the reason this works is that you are trying to raise your status in society. So you start imitating the status signals of people like one rung above you because you're trying to make your way up. So you start wearing the clothes or the watch or that kind of thing, right? And they're doing the same thing of the rung above them, and they're doing the thing of the rung above them. Eventually, you reach the highest status people, and they have nobody to copy above them. But the people behind them are trying to catch up and imitate them.
Okay.
Right? But the people highest status, they want to maintain their highest status. So they need to have distinction. They need to have something that looks different about them than the people the rung below them. Which means they now need to invent something new.
Okay.
Some new way of wearing clothes, some new thing that's popular that is now a symbol of their status. And this is what drives the fashion cycle. The reason fashion changes all the time is this constant battle.
It's a race.
People trying to catch up in their imitation game, and the highest status people, because they don't want the people behind them to catch up and imitate their status signals, they have to invent brand new status signals every season.
Wow.
Yeah. Or like people in general, like I think of like Madonna, right? She was always like kind of a fashion icon because she would develop her own fashion trends just by wearing or coming up with new ideas because she was at the top of her game.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people who are in the high tier where they have to
come up with
the whole pigeon outfit or something.
Pigeon outfit, or even just on the level of a luxury brand, right? Chanel or Gucci or these companies, they have to come up with new outfits.
Yes.
Every season.
But maintaining the style, right?
They have to maintain continuity,
That's
but they need to come up with something new every season.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the brands that are trying to catch up and imitate them will be able to catch up and imitate them. And now everybody looks the same. So they have to constantly be trying to stay one step ahead and come up with the new rules of the game.
Got it.
Yeah.
Of status signaling, which is like now this year, burgundy's in. Or like now we're wearing high top pants or high waist pants or low waist pants. And this weird little game theory of status signaling is literally the reason why things look old.
Wow.
Because it cycles.
Because
we're chasing.
It's
Everyone
constantly
is chasing the leader.
If the people at the highest level were happy enough to kind of stay where they are and this game theory was in place, we could get to a point where we decide like, oh, this thing looks good and we like the way this looks good and we don't have to change it.
Yeah.
But as a result of the status signal in game theory, people have to constantly keep changing the status signals so people behind them don't catch up.
Status. High status and detachment. Ooh, is this like a psychology one?
I guess so.
Okay. Very high status individuals need to seem detached from active attempts at status claims. Boasting and bragging are status claims that backfire and are perceived as low status. Interesting. Lower end handbags retain large logos. Higher end handbags have small logos and use recognizable design instead.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then the last part is for you.
Okay.
Actually, it's perfect.
For every $5,000 increase in price, the logo shrinks by a centimeter. Jonah Berger, Mercedes logo, A-Class 16 centimeters, C-Class 12 centimeters, S-Class 6 centimeters. I had no idea
How big is your
about
logo?
the Mercedes. I don't know. I have to measure it.
We
I
have to
never
go out
really
and measure
measured it. That is crazy.
It's like a reverse,
Interesting.
measuring contest.
That is nice.
Yeah.
So, for example, some of the high-end Hermes bags, right? The logo is like poked, like it's like made as holes inside of the
Poked in
leather.
the leather, yeah,
right?
I know that
But
one,
it's
yeah.
meant to be worn
Inside.
against your leg. So it's never showing outside. And so the highest status individuals, when they are signaling, they're signaling in a more subtle way. Like, remember we were talking about Patek Philippe?
Yeah.
It's a more subtle signaling.
Very subtle.
They're not going to have a big pattern, like a Louis Vuitton pattern. It's going to be something, if you know, you know.
Yeah. No, a lot of people, like, if you go to a fancy steakhouse, a lot of people, there was a social media post I watched, some girl explaining, if you go to a fancy steakhouse, the most richest people are usually the ones who are the most low-key, wearing
Yeah.
simple dress and outfits that's not standing out. And the
Exactly.
poorest ones are usually the ones who
Show
are
off
showing
everything
off.
I have.
Yeah,
Yes,
wearing whatever kind of
exactly.
luxury brand, showing everything.
Exactly.
Because a lot of the people who are like high status don't want to show that off, right?
yeah.
It's deemed as kind of like like boasting, or like, you know what I mean? So they don't want to do that.
It's also that same principle we talked about with Dr. Ian, where from Sun Tzu, when you are weak, appear strong. When you are strong, appear weak.
Yeah.
Just from a pure like military strategy standpoint, it helps a lot, right? And then, so there's a certain point in time where you generally don't need to prove anything.
Yeah.
And therefore you have the luxury of being detached
Exactly.
from the entire status signaling game.
Very, very cool. All right, next card. Gene, your turn.
Originality is an aristocratic privilege. An indication of high status is being able to get away with distinctive acts,
Okay.
like dressing up as a pigeon to a party by Marc Jacobs.
Alright.
Okay.
So if somebody else tried to do that at that party,
Yeah.
chances are they would not have been able to pull it off.
They would probably not be let into a party.
Yeah, they probably would not be
Yes.
let into the party. So one of the ways the game theory of status signaling works is that it's either people who have highest status are able to pull it off, or it's the people of lowest status in a hierarchy are pulling it off because they have nothing to lose.
Okay.
Which a lot of times this is why new status signals start forming in societies. Things like the grunge movement or punk music, these subcultures, right? It's when you have people who are a lower end of a status hierarchy.
Yeah.
Whether it's a global hierarchy or your local Dungeons and Dragons club.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, people are constantly status signaling and trying to figure out where they are in a hierarchy. Originality, distinctive acts are kind of the purview of the people either at the very top or the people at the bottom. Who have
Yeah,
nothing
there was
to lose.
there was this game on the internet I saw people playing. It was called Homeless or Hipster. And it was just pictures of guys in Silver Lake, and you had to guess if they're either homeless man or a hipster from Silver Lake.
That is so funny.
But it's true, right? It's like
Yeah.
either the low or the high end status gets
Oh
to
wow.
dictate fashion. The danger of false status claims. Pretending to be high status through status signals can be turned into real status. Making false status claims can destroy your status completely.
So that's the danger of the game theory, is that pretending. So, for example, again, trying to put on a fake status symbol, potentially, like a fake watch, fake bag, whatever it is, or other types of status symbols there are, like Instagram followers. These are all different ways
Yeah.
we're signaling status, can create actual real status.
Okay.
It's fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you are discovered, it destroys your status.
Yeah.
In the David Marks book, they were talking about Vanilla Ice as the story, right?
Okay.
Because when he came onto the scene, apparently he was the hottest thing out there. He's a white boy rapper, supposedly from the streets of Miami, gangbanger. Yeah. He came up with a song, but it turned out it was a ripoff of a Queen song. And very quickly, he was making all these status signals. But whenever you do a status signal, there's also a status appraisal from the people, whether they accept your signal or not. And his career crashed and burned.
Wow.
Because it turns out he didn't have any criminal history. He wasn't from the streets. He was a suburban kid, right? He didn't write his own stuff. He was faking the status signals of what was kind of an up and coming art form in that point in time in hip hop, and had a really bright moment, and then crashed and burned. So status anxiety. Strangely, societies with higher income inequality lead to higher consumption of luxury goods because of status anxiety. You would think that in like hardship times, people would spend less on luxury products.
Okay.
But because, again, luxury goods are a signal of status, and people are trying to change their destiny, the actual consumption of luxury goods goes up in hard economic times and in a society that has a high inequality.
That's crazy.
Which is kind of weird.
That is weird.
Which connects to this other thing that in times of economic hardship, it has been noticed that if a person only has $2, one will be spent on survival, while the other will be spent on some small luxury good.
Really?
And this is famously known as the lipstick effect. That during times like the Great Depression, you would have money, right? And you'd spend whatever you have left on just like feeding your family, but you would save like some amount of money on a luxury good because it's something that helps you at least connect to some semblance of hope, some semblance of normalcy, of like that this is not all dark times, and people through just purchasing like a little lipstick and doing their makeup, even though it's the Great Depression and things are going really wrong and things are going downhill. Yeah, people reach out and to these luxury goods as symbols, as things that allow them to connect to the worlds that are built through the mythology.
All right.
And yeah, I think like for example, people who love Starbucks coffee, you know, you could be making minimum wage, but you'll spend $5 just for a cup of coffee, just for the status of having, hey, I'm drinking Starbucks.
All right, we got 2 cards left, guys.
Okay.
Clothes maketh the man. In a 2019 Princeton study, people were judged as significantly more competent when clothing was perceived as richer. Judgments were made in as little as 130 milliseconds.
Okay.
Right, so people putting out a status signal of wearing clothes that were perceived as richer clothes. I think probably a suit or something in this case. Even when explicitly told to ignore the clothes or warned that clothes have nothing to do with ability, the biased judgment persisted. So even when people were told, like, ignore the clothes, you know, that has nothing to do with the person's ability, that status signal still got around and still affected people's perception of your ability, of how competent you are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So status signals are powerful. And
well, I think people would want to hire Marina over us based on how she's dressed versus
for sure.
No, but
so
it's
it does
basically,
work.
but it also helps when you know that you dressed well. It boosts your self-confidence, right? It boosts your feel of self, and then it changes basically the person you are, right? Because when I'm uncomfortable, right, or I know that I have a hole in my, stocking or something, I would be uncomfortable, and everything else would, crash.
It's if you remember from the episode on becoming someone else and personas and alter egos, we talked about enclothed cognition, which is the fact that by wearing certain clothes, you actually change your performance.
You change your personality.
The lab coat effect.
The lab coat effect, or when a guy wears a suit to a negotiation, his testosterone goes up and he gets more aggressive in the negotiation. So this Princeton study is kind of the opposite, because it's somebody viewing somebody in clothes and perceiving them as higher value, taking in those status signals, while in the Becoming Someone Else episode, we're talking about how by wearing those clothes, it's what you're talking about. It actually changes who you are, your identity, which changes your performance.